Cryostasis is a first-person horror game set aboard a nuclear ice-breaking ship lodged into the Arctic ice. Atmosphere. From the moment the game begins, it really drives home the point of how hostile the Arctic environments are. It's both hard to see and difficult to move in the Arctic tundra with the high-speed winds and perilous cracks in the ice, but once you board the North Wind, there's an extreme loneliness in searching the ship for survivors. With the extent of the damage from the freezing temperatures and the iceberg tear, it feels like walking through a graveyard, encountering ghosts. The walls of the offices and the engine rooms are coated with frost, and giant tears in the ship allow the blizzard to seep in. Thanks to the visuals and the use of reverb, it's all very immersive. The lighting is pretty good, with some parts being very moody and picturesque. I like how the flashlight is a dim yellow, showing how old it is. The problem is that the game really spirals out of control over the first few hours, as the combat switches from intense melee combat to tedious gunfights and tend to drag on for longer than I'd like. The gameplay gets stuck in a rut of pressing switches and gunning down weird enemies to the point where it drags you out of the atmosphere it crafted so hard at the start. There are still some good moments later in the game, but the later game for me was also plagued with game crashes, which made it hard to appreciate what it was trying to achieve. But it's hard to deny what it established at the start. The first entrance onto the boat was very atmospheric, and it's still trying in the late game despite bug problems. That's one Harry Mason. Scares. The enemy designs are really disturbing and descend slowly from regular-looking humans to twisted insect-like people with wings, metal-bound creations with amputated legs. One or two reminded me of enemies from The Suffering, and some looked like the walking fish from Junji Ito's Gyo, which brought back unpleasant memories, all of which had either brown metal skin or pale blue skin depending on their percentage of human, I guess. There were some cool sections in a diving suit that made you feel a little helpless as the enemy swam around you and grabbed your suit, but a lot of these parts came near the start of the game, and the game didn't do much later on besides throw players into gunfights. There was a lack of polish, with certain parts being ruined by technical issues. There's a section where you control a boat through deep water while being attacked by an assailant who jumps out to fight you. When you knock him back into the water, his body just vanishes rather unnaturally. His attack timing is almost clockwork too, and it feels like wasted potential when, with just a bit better timing, it could have left the player stewing in anticipation, waiting for his next strike. It almost achieves greatness, but misses the mark a lot. That's still one Harry Mason. Sound design. Whilst the game does an excellent job using reverb to give you the feeling you're really inside a giant ship, the default volume settings were deafening, and I had to turn it down to around 20% to avoid hearing damage. The voice acting was pretty good, especially for the captain and some of the recurring crew members, but sometimes voices over the loudspeaker were impossible to understand. There wasn't much music, some sparse string sections, and that was about it, but it works in the case of the game. The music only comes in to emphasize emotional sections, the rest of it is an eerie silence and the sound of the blizzard outside. The diving suit section was especially realistic, and there was clearly a lot of thought put into it. That's 2 Harry Masons. There wasn't any blood of any kind, and this was clearly intentional. I feel it could have been better with some blood, especially for the melee combat, but it led me to believe I was fighting ghosts, which may or may not have been the developer's intention. That's 3 Harry Masons.
Through the door and up the stairs, quickly! It won't hold much longer!
Story. You play as Russian meteorologist Alexander Nestorov, who travels the Arctic ice on a sled to board the Northwind, the ship that's about to take him the rest of the way, but finds the ship suspended in ice and its crew absent. Through various flashbacks, you start to piece together what happened to the crew by using Alexander's special power, Mental Echo, which allows him to travel into the past of the dead and take their place to prevent their deaths and alter history. Nearly all of the story is relayed through witnessing flashbacks, which makes a pleasant change from reading diary entries. But there's also the narrated fairy tale of leadership, which parallels the fate of the ship. The time travel story is really interesting and you have a chance to really do good and make an impact on it. My only gripe is that it's not very clear how some things came to be just by playing the game. I had to look up things on the wiki to fully understand certain things. But overall the story is pretty engaging from what you can make of it. I thought it was pretty cool how the story of the ship and the fairy tale crossed paths, making the final score 4 out of 5 Harry Masons. Whilst the game is extremely glitchy, which ruined the later parts of it for me, it is a decent horror game with a fascinating story, when it runs properly. Whilst clearly not intended to scare you into oblivion, its story and atmosphere make it pretty creepy and mysterious. Again, I'd like to remind you this whole thing is down to my opinion in horror games. If you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I was creeped out by the enemies, I did not scream like a banshee or run away from the computer. Now I advise you don't either. There will be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. And always go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.